days of rain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feels like it's rained every day for the last 3 weeks, except for today.
Since October 1st, there's been only 13 days of more than 40% sunshine. So yeah, I mean, some of these huge megawatt fields we deal with,
Yeah.
that you think there's something wrong with them,
Ah.
and it's just because they're not. It's
They're not
cloudy,
getting
cloud,
any rain.
low fog, everything. So
Solar doesn't do well without the solar.
I'd rather have a misty, rainy day than downpours, because you get the diffused light, and it definitely generates more power that way. So.
Gives you a whole new perspective on the weather, eh?
It does. Unfortunately, you can't predict it, but, 2 years ago, most systems were running at 120% of their targets, so, but,
Well, we'll all be baked in 40 years anyway, so.
that's true.
Yeah, just to give you an update,
I have
we
one.
took 2 votes last week when you
Does it
weren't
revolve
here.
around printers?
We
No,
did,
yeah.
Article 8,
Was here last week, wasn't I?
no, or the week before,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
2 weeks
right.
ago.
And we didn't meet last week, so.
Hello.
How are you?
We're in the big leagues, I see again.
We are, yeah.
That's right, last week was Halloween.
Ah.
Yeah, so the
The week
meeting before
I think I
that.
was here, and then the week before I missed. Anyway, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Whatever I missed, you.
Okay,
you've got
yeah,
something on.
just to bring you up to date. Article 8, we voted as a board, affirmative.
I swear I was here to vote.
Were you there
I-
for that one?
Yeah, I wasn't there for that one.
You weren't there?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I missed.
Okay, so,
I missed the last one too.
okay, Article 8. Sorry, Pat.
CPC.
trying to
You were
Okay.
the
remember.
responsible one who was there, right?
I was
We voted yes to that.
snoozing in the
And
corner, that's it.
Article 14, we voted yes to that. We got some information. Those were the only 2.
Oh. Yeah, we thought there was a backstory behind that one, or?
Right, and it was due to the fact that they were trying to retain folks, and that's the one group, board committee, that they were having difficulty with, so they didn't mind offering and changing it, and they need people.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Yeah.
Okay, you might want to change your name tag, or people
No.
are gonna think you're Dave, so just switch them.
I'll sit at Arthur.
Oh, you don't have to.
It's fine. Somebody went through all the trouble to.
Move the
No,
thing.
they just moved the plate.
Yeah.
Literally just
I'm good.
pulled them out of the sleeve and put them down.
So I can see Pat better. Hey Pat,
Wave to each other.
how are you?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. How's Boyd's Crossing treating you?
All right. Yeah.
Nice.
A lot of work going on. Coming together nicely.
Nice.
Switch your name tags. Robin just plunked them and stuff. Okay.
This is the fancy room, huh?
It is.
This used to be the room we met all the time.
Yeah.
And,
Last,
and then planning board took it?
2 years, we haven't, we've been relegated
your
to
feet on the way in?
other places. But this was the standard meeting place for
Saw
many
the
years.
news today from where you're from.
Yeah.
Naked guy fell through the ceiling in a Waffle House.
That is like the best news ever.
Thought it was just like
Combines 2 of
standard-
my favorite things,
standard
Waffle House,
standard
drunk people, and
Wednesday-
Alabama.
Yeah, standard Wednesday fare. I was most surprised it made the news.
In a day like today, today's been a pretty eventful news day.
I guess people were looking for the lighter side of things today.
Yes. Leave it to you to find it, though.
Anything that happens with Waffle House, I'm kept in the loop.
I was just telling somebody that. I forgot who I was telling. I think it might have been Chrissy. I was like, yeah, every time Jonathan goes to a Waffle House, he has to send me a picture because he knows I'm the only one that will appreciate it. Yep. I'm going down in December 14th. I'll text you a picture. I'm sure we'll eat there. It's around 2 in the morning.
day?
Here, see, it's on my phone, right? Waffle.
Who do you have to pick up at 8:30?
What?
Didn't you say you had a hard stop at 8:30?
Wait,
did.
Oh, you just don't have to pick anybody up. You just want to go home.
Was Jack coming?
Best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Supposed to give me, he's supposed to give me a ride home, so.
Okay.
Based on that theory, then no, he's not coming.
What?
I said, based on that theory, then no, he's not coming.
All right.
If I'm out on
Who's the,
Seekonk in the dark.
young person who's helping us? No. Yes, that's fine, okay. I think we're all set. We good? Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, this is the Norfolk Advisory Board meeting for November 7th. I am Joyce Terrio, sitting in for Steve McDonough. And if we could start with Arthur and just go around the room and introduce yourself to our audience.
Arthur Franzak.
David Lutz.
Susan Klein.
Brian Beachkowski.
Pat Sneed.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
And Robin? Thank you very much. We have a decent agenda. We are planning on discussing some of the warrant articles that are up for the special town meeting in a couple of weeks. And I believe we can just start right off with Todd, Finance Director. Good evening.
I think we have,
Yeah, we have them.
We have all of them? Yeah. If I could interrupt for 1 second, this is actually going to be which article? The transfers? Article 2. I think we had a couple of questions on Article 1. Do you want to wait for Jack to come, or would you like to discuss that?
as best I can.
Okay, does anyone want to start with the questions that we had on Article 1? I think we had some concerns about verbiage and why it looks different to us and why it's on the warrant.
So Article 1, as I recall, is for the premium of bonds.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we have a microphone?
You want to move up here? And you can move up
You can just have this one.
Thanks. Sure. So Article 1 is for the bond premiums. Oh, good, thanks. So the Municipal Modernization Act, one of the items that was also included in there allows for us as a municipal organization to take premiums that we receive on bonds that we get. In this case, this premium is related to the public safety building that we went out for, which was in total about $8 million, which also refinanced some of our older bonds. And so when we did the bond issuance of that, there was a premium of $211. We couldn't do anything with that $211 because we didn't have the language originally when we crafted the motion or the warrant for the public safety debt. So in order to rectify that and correct it so that we can use a premium to reduce the amount authorized, we have to have that language. And it's a standard language.
Past, though, for any.
You'd have to capitalize it and spread it out over the next however long the bond was, so.
And that's what we've been doing with everything.
We actually have one that we're doing now that's being spread out, which is related to the school building, I believe, over at Freeman when we did the bonds for that.
Okay, so, chapter 44, section 20, that has all come from the municipal act?
That refers to the particular provision of the state statutes that's for the bond premiums, yes.
Okay. Okay, anybody have any questions about that?
Can I,
Yes.
it may be a simplistic question, but what creates a premium? Where did the $211 come from? I'm just curious.
So typically, people will invest in bonds, and they'll pay a premium because they're looking for the interest rates.
Right.
And, you know, they expect to get monies back, so in a good interest environment, you're going to get a better bond premium, and that's where the differential comes into play.
Okay.
All right, anybody have any other questions? No? Okay, very good. Can we start with Article 2 then?
Absolutely. Article 2, in front of you, you have the listing. There's 2 pages. It's broken out a few different reasons. So first section, we had a couple bills that were related back to fiscal year 18 that weren't paid in fiscal year 18. They missed the deadline in order to be paid for in fiscal year 19, because we can typically reserve or encumber monies in order to pay bills from the previous year, but they actually have to, you know, have funds that are available, and then also we have to actually have the bills. We didn't have the bills presented to us until much later, so therefore, we're making payments for these bills. And we're gonna be utilizing the town administrator's expense for this year, so there's no major problems there as far as the cash is concerned. Total is of $501.63.
Okay, so that's gonna be Article 3 then? Will that be considered Article 3?
I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, all right. I would think so.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Jack. Okay, perfect. And then we move into all of the transfers.
So the first part is departmental transfers, and from free cash, we're gonna need about $40,750, and that includes $750 conservation. During their budgeting process this year, they realize they need to order some signs and things of that nature that they haven't done in the past. So they like to, on a going forward basis, have that as a line item in their budget. And because they didn't budget for it previously, they would ask for that to be budgeted for this year. That's the $750. And then the $40,000 is for the Buckley Man LSP. The Board of Health needs to pay for the services in order for that to occur. And that's approximately $40,000. So total for that is $40,750. Moving on into our water enterprise fund.
Can you clarify what Buckley Man LSP is?
Mr. Hathaway?
Sure. So,
The mic.
The Abbeville project for Lawrence Street, where on the Buckley Man project, the LSP, which I know Andy could tell you 1,000 more things about what an LSP is than I can. But the LSP is licensed site professional. Thank you. That really is from the town's. We're hiring a licensed site professional to look at it from the town's point of view and protect our interests. The developer, working with the DEP, has to hire his own LSP, but the selectmen felt it was necessary to, and a lot of the land use boards work together. They wanted us to hire our own, so that is a cost that we're incurring. Double checking the developer's work, making sure that the testing for all the pollution and other site concerns are handled appropriately.
Thank you.
Sure.
Was there any consideration to seeing if you could get the developer to pay for that? Allow us to hire?
He's already paying for one LSP.
No, I understand that, but it's not unlike hiring an engineer to review plans.
I think he's paid for a lot of different site reviews. I think the zoning board has had a lot of discussions with him about that. I wasn't part of that, but I think my understanding was at the end of the day, he had already hired an LSP who was supposed to be working independently and who the DEP generally feels comfortable with. That he's putting his license on the line, but we wanted that extra level of security to have our own LSP.
Is that it?
Yep.
Moving on to the water enterprises. So this is to true up a couple of accounts that I inadvertently did not include when we did the budgeting process. Mr. McGee was kind enough to provide me with a couple of budgets throughout the budgeting season. And so in order to rectify that, moving some monies out of the undesignated fund or the reserve account of 45,610 for water engineering contracting services, that would need an additional 35,610. Maintenance expenses related to the water revenue, water expenses would be 7,500, and then fuel for the water would be another 2,500, which accounts for the 45,610. And then similarly situated with the wastewater expenses of $2,700. And again, that would come from the reserves, not from free cash.
Any questions on those transfers?
Not specifically on the transfer, but just curious, how much money is in these funds at this point?
If you turn the page, at the bottom, you'll see water retained earnings with the adjustments be
$1 million.
$1,000,200, and then wastewater would be 89,915.
Okay.
I knew you were gonna ask that question. I did not.
That's a high, pretty high reserve compared to prior years, so we're in good shape, it looks like, for well drilling projects and so
Don't
forth.
jinx me. Next item is for ambulance-related items. Previous at board discussions, we talked about the purchase of an ambulance and using proceeds from the ambulance receipts to pay for that ambulance. And you'll see that as the band payment for the ambulance of $67,000. Part of the budgeting process last year, I identified and worked with the fire department to say, you know, in order for us to have a balanced budget, we need to kind of cut your budget. And by doing so, we've cut their ambulance account salaries by $31,000, ambulance operations of $30,000, and training by $7,000. Reinstituting those monies from the ambulance funds will bring their budgets back to where they needed to be.
What is
And then-
ambulance 14th?
I'll get to there, 1 second.
Okay.
Ambulance billing, just above that, is, we have to pay for the ambulance billing services that are done, and they typically have been under year over year. And so making a smaller adjustment of $5,000 to true up what I anticipate the expenses for the year.
We outsource that?
A portion of it, yes.
Okay.
So that'll bring us up to what I believe the anticipated expenses are for the year. And then the 14th is adding a 14th firefighter to the program.
Okay.
And because it's a little bit ambulance-related, in order to start the process, figure we'll pull from the ambulance receipts, since we're trying to be very careful about the free cash. So that 14th will allow us from January through June to have a new gentleman start on with the 14th firefighter.
So that's salary, essentially salary
Salaries,
and benefits
yes.
and stuff?
Correct. Any other questions on the ambulance?
That would be anticipated to roll into next year's budget to continue.
Yep.
Any questions on those? Oh,
Moving to
okay.
page 2. This top article is on the capital expenditures. Giving you your money back, $50,000. Told you I would.
Bugging you about that.
Told you I would. Building department, unfortunately, is driving around in a vehicle that's about ready to fall with the wheels off. It will not pass inspection the next go-around, so we need to provide a vehicle that he can get to and from sites and do the inspections. Vehicle that we're looking at is a Ford Escape for the $24,000. Maintenance department, they don't really have, except for a van, to be able to go from building to building to do the necessary things that they need to do on a daily basis. Providing them a Ford Transit, again, about $24,000, what we expect the cost to be for that. Police department, they were originally looking for 2 vehicles. I've reduced that down to one vehicle. I'm cognizant of trying to keep the vehicle program at 2 vehicles per year because they do use the cruisers almost 24 hours a day. But in order to get to where we want to be and still feel comfortable with having free cash available, we reduced the police department down to one vehicle, which would be about the $57,750. And that vehicle cost includes the digital radio installation as well as all the lights and bells and whistles that would be necessary for the police vehicle. One thing that's not on here, and we're investigating it, is digital radios for the police department. Franklin and other towns have them, and we need to potentially look at that. We're exploring options right now, so just want to make sure that you're aware that we're looking into something. We're not doing anything, to the best of my knowledge, immediately, but want to make you aware. Fire department, the self-contained breathing apparatus air fill system. That's a complete system. Our portion is going to be $99,466. The total portion or expense that's going to be happening is about $185,000, and that's the balance that's being picked up by the state is a grant to cover for the cost of the tanks and the helmets that go on, and they have the ability to see and smoke, and for search and rescue a little bit easier.
For one person?
No, that's for the entire department.
Oh, okay.
Do we have any now?
We have plenty now.
it's
They are
necessary,
all
but-
probably, how would you say, not up to code?
So that gives 14 firefighters what they need.
Correct.
Okay.
Energy Committee audit, that's gonna be in Article 12, I believe, later, as of right now. Item, it's included in here, but, obviously we can, if it's approved in the Article 12 item, that's the dollar amount that's gonna be, so we can move that around, but it's $15,000. Lawrence Street. So 2 things for Lawrence Street. We have to do engineering services. That's the big component. It was about $185,000 originally. We paid a little bit up front to start the process. The balance that's due is $172,000. And then the other items, which are the utility supplements relating to $84,000, is a combination of Verizon and Eversource to get this, their services through and over in the Lawrence Street area. So those are those 2 items. And then the last item, which is the Bush Pond clearing, which is, we'd be outsourcing the clearing of Bush Pond. Residents had come to the selectmen's meeting to discuss water chestnuts as a weed, and there was a request by several residents for the town to either rent or hire a service to come in and basically go through the ponds to rid the chestnuts, because I guess they become very prolific if they're let keep going, and that's apparently what's happening in all of our ponds.
Okay,
Is
the
there-
I'm sorry, the article that I read mentioned Highland.
Yep, Highland was the original lake, and then one of the other lakes, which is escaping me right at this moment, not Mirror Lake, but Highland Lake is the other lake that's,
Right.
so the 20,000 will cover the cost of the
Machinery for both?
machinery of both, and I'm sorry, I was thinking Man's Pond, I think is the other, Highland and Man's Pond, I think are the 2.
Okay,
So
I have the
it
wrong
would,
name,
it
I'm
would
sorry.
cover the equipment for renting to clear those out for a year.
yeah,
It's a multi-year process, though. So what we're doing is, Bob McGee is talking to some of the other towns about trying to purchase the equipment in a regional capacity. And then, obviously, we'd be able to use it year after year. Because according to the research, Barbara Bartholomew, God bless her, she does a ton of research. It's about a 3-year process to actually clear out the water chestnuts, because they grow, but the ones that are seeding this year will come up next year. And so you have to go back 3 years in a row to really kind of clean out the ponds. The selectmen didn't want to go crazy and purchase the equipment for close to $100,000. So they wanted to go through a process of renting it for 1 year. But if we can purchase we've already heard from Rentham and some of the M towns that they are having the same problem. So if we can buy it regionally, then we'll just share the equipment and solve all of our problems.
Okay, so it's not Bush Pond then? Or is that going to be,
It's definitely Highland, and I thought the other one was Man Pond, but
okay,
I'll change it to Highland.
I think all of our ponds are having the problem to a degree. So-
yeah, I wouldn't argue with that, but I think if you put Bush Pond down there and people have read that article and are
Put
expecting
Highland.
Highland.
Scrivener,
Just a thought.
Scrivener error.
And Concom approved that? Did they go before Concom?
The Conservation Commission, we discussed it with them. I live on Highland Lake.
Yes.
And they're like, hey, anything you can do would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
Are there any permits required to do mechanical harvesting?
The people who we
Orders?
would contract, getting the permits is part of that process.
Right.
Would this amount stay the same if you bought it as well, because you'd be sharing the equipment with 3 or 4
Yeah,
other
we
towns?
expect this would be our portion if we bought it.
If you bought it. And is it also the portion if you're gonna rent it just for 1 year?
This is definitely that we've already, the committee has already negotiated that with the firm, so that's the amount. If we do rent it for a year, and
When will you know if you're going to be able to share it versus renting it? Seems, if it, I mean, it costs the same to
It'll-
own it
it'll
one
take some
time.
time because all of the towns are kind of going through these same, negotiations and debate. So we probably won't know until early spring about.
When were you looking to rent it and do the project?
Not
Next
until the
summer?
spring, right?
Yeah,
May, June?
the season to do it is like spring, summer, because all the seeds drop in like August and the whole thing starts over again. So I think the idea was rent it now, hopefully with some money that Jack can be found, thank you, Jack, and the selectmen, and then we would be in a position to make a capital purchase in the next budget cycle, because we couldn't do that this year. Budget's already set.
Any other questions on the expenditures, capital? That was gonna be Article 4, yes? Okay, so the comments are gonna be gone then, under Article 4. Okay.
So that total is up to 546,716. Adding that plus the 40,750 from the first page totals to the 587,466. We add $1 million, $1,033,000 certified free cash, subtracting the 587 leaves us with free cash of about 445. The next item discussed a little bit earlier with relation to Article 1 regarding the bond premium. If Article 1 is accepted, that bond premium transfer would then go from the bond premium account that it's currently sitting in to the public safety building, which would then reduce the public safety building's authorization amount needed for funding for the 211. Any questions on that portion? Next
That-
portion?
I'm sorry, is that why Article 1 is first?
Yes.
Because, okay, you have to free up that money to do anything else.
If Article 1 is voted, we will not probably table the transfer for that, because then we'd have to just do the regular 20-year. All right, next one is, we have 5 accounts that have been on the books for quite some time. Projects have been done, finalized, finished. Cash has been in the account for a little while, so instead of having the cash continue to sit there, suggested to move it over to a like-kind project of same length or duration, similarly situated there too. This case would be for the public safety building. Adding those up, you get 80,153, and then moving that over to the public safety building would be 80,153 towards the expenses for that.
Yes.
Any questions?
Does this help offset some of the overtures?
Yes, by $80,000.
And 211.
Yes, ma'am. Well, the 211 actually reduces our authorization to go out for bidding, so it doesn't help with the expenses per se, because it's not the money. But it does help cash flow.
The 211 helps our tax rate because we won't have that excluded debt.
And then the last item, and this relates to water capital projects that have been out there for quite some time. Closing those out, again, $8,551.58. We voted at the Springtown meeting to do $2.6 million for the well. We would just transfer these monies over to that, that would help reduce the 2.6 million once that's undertaken. We have not gone out to bond on that. That'll happen in the spring, most likely. And that's it for transfers.
Question back with the vehicles, the old vehicles, if I remember, go through a reverse auction, and that goes back into free cash, or what account does the sale go into?
It would go in through free cash, yes. So we would receive monies,
Yeah.
we'd have to wait for the end of the year, balance out all the accounts, then the DLS comes in and says, okay, here's your certified free cash. It would flow through that way.
Thanks.
On the vehicles, is the maintenance department vehicle a work vehicle essentially? That's why
Ford
it's a-
Transit
it's a-
van.
Is that why it's a transit? Because it's got gear and equipment and
Yes,
stuff like that?
Yes, sir.
It's like one of those little white
Yeah, I know what
Ford
they are.
minivans.
I was just wondering if, is that what they need it for? And then the building department, are they just driving around in that, or,
Ford Escape, but he's got to go off, you know,
so it'll be a four-wheel drive thing? Okay, all right.
It was the cheapest, most fuel-efficient four-wheel drive we could find.
That's why I'm asking.
And we'd like to, we prefer to stay with Ford because our mechanics are.
You anticipate my concerns.
Mhm.
He's driving around a 2003 Tahoe right now, which used to be the fire chief's.
We should keep the Tahoe until the energy survey is done, so it increases our baseline.
Questions, a wording question. Articles 2 and 3 both refer to raise and appropriate or transfer. And these are transfer articles exclusively, right? There is no raising or appropriating, and there's no ability to do so. So I
We're
just
not
wonder.
asking you to raise, you're right, we're not asking you to raise and appropriate, but if for some reason we had capacity in the tax rate, in the tax levy, we might.
But you still wouldn't be raising or raising and appropriating, to me, implies additional revenues.
Correct. But, so the motion would just be to transfer, but,
Yes.
but the warrant article gives us more options if for some reason free cash wasn't available, or, and perchance we had money in the tax
Has-
levy.
Has this been standard language in the transfer articles all these years?
Yeah.
And I've just never paid attention to it, I
I
guess.
didn't want to embarrass you, but yes, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on these two sheets of paper that Todd just went over with us? So, Jack, you guys are gonna take care of changing all of the comments?
Yeah, those got shuffled around a little bit, last week, and we'll clean those up.
Okay. While you're still here, if we could indulge Article 5, which is the Water Enterprise Fund, is authorization of capital items.
So I think, so we end up doing, as we get closer to town meetings, we'll take Todd's sheets here and we'll
We're gonna
order
give
them
you-
and put the article numbers on them, but I think,
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken, there is some water,
Yeah, 2,700.
yeah.
all right, so you'll move those.
Yeah, that 8,551, that article will be part of Article,
Okay,
the
so
water.
that will be Water Enterprise.
Yeah, so we'll lump all the transfers together and we'll label those on that sheet. And,
Okay. And then Article 6 was the wastewater enterprise.
and that'll just be IP'd, right?
Okay.
Todd?
No, we have $2,700.
27.
Oh, you're right, sorry.
Which one was that, the
This-
27?
Yeah.
Oh, the 2,700, yep. So number 6, okay. Just so that we can reference. Very good. We do have another question. We have Article 13, which happens to be submitted by our representative. And you sort of,
I think that will be
Explain that.
relabeled as the selectmen, actually.
okay,
The representative has been working with us on that. Unfortunately, town council hasn't gotten the language for that put together yet. 5 years ago, there was a legislation done that authorized the transfer from the state to the town of 5 acres around Pond Street, and we're trying to get that done. There was a lot of negotiations back and forth, and we're working with DCAM now, and we believe we're on the right track. Hoping that town council would have that language for you tonight, but he does not.
Okay, all right, so you'll get back to us, and there'll be a dollar figure associated with that?
$400 per acre, and there's 5 acres, so it'll be $2,000, and there may be some miscellaneous expenses, deed preparation and survey work is all done. So I don't think we have to pay for that, but that's part of the discussions with DCAM.
Okay, and we're prepared for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you actually going to put fields or develop this land, or is it just gonna be an additional buffer?
There's a proposal to potentially put 3 fields additionally around Pond Street.
Is that doable? I'm somewhat familiar with the land.
It's not ideal land. We're working with the state rep.
But I understand it's good for passive recreation, so that's not a bad price for passive recreation.
Yeah, and some of the discussions we had years ago was talking about access to the water.
Yeah,
New
exactly,
access.
yeah.
We'll see.
Joyce,
Yes,
this was my idea. This land thing, I did
Yes.
this with 5 other towns.
okay,
Norfolk is the last one to execute their agreements. So if you notice Route 1A,
yes,
across on Prison, that clearing,
yep,
that was the land that was given, or that was sold, transferred to Walpole.
okay,
So-
all right. Good to know, it just was very,
Vague.
thank you, Susan.
The attachments that have the survey and the field locations and stuff like that, unfortunately, that's it. Because the land that was mapped out goes right up to the Army Corps easement. You can't encroach on that. And there's one field that encroaches on.
Ah.
So that's gonna have to get tweaked.
Okay,
So, but again, I mean, you're looking at acres and literally the field is that big, so.
okay, all right, that's good to know, thank you. Do we have any other
we-
questions? Do we have any questions for Todd and or Jack? Do we have any other questions for the Board of Selectmen, do you think, at this point in time?
Jim apologize. Jim will be here next week. If, he's on his away this week, but he'll be here next week.
All right. We'll see how far we get tonight and let's see if we'll have meetings.
What have we already voted on? Do we have a?
I'm sorry?
What have we already voted on?
We voted on 8, if I'm not mistaken, and we voted on 14.
Can we get clarification on 7?
On 7. Sure, ask away.
Just wondering if you could clarify the intent of 7?
So this is one of the articles we call a boilerplate article that allows any department head or committee, usually the chairs, to give an update to town meeting. So I would, usually the people that get up and speak are CPC, affordable housing. I suspect George Cronin from the Public Safety Building Committee will give an update. That's the.
My memory is any better on this, or no worse on this, let's say, that this is not an article we vote on
Correct.
historically.
Yeah.
It's just,
Makes sense. Okay.
it's
Thank
just
you.
there. I don't
Yeah.
know why it's an article even, because
Well,
it's just historically.
Still needs to be like an agenda item, so that's
Yeah.
why it's an article.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
is the planning board coming next week? Do we know?
Only if after our discussion tonight you feel that you want them.
Choose wisely.
Young Jedi.
Why you,
No, I
have
mean,
some
did we
information.
talk, no, I'm sorry, I'm
That's okay,
drawing a blank on this one. These are,
Which one?
this is both of the planning board ones. But-
yes. But I can fill you in.
Okay, fine, thank you. That's right, Joyce, you talked to them, I apologize.
All right. Everyone want to just take a quick look, pass through the warrant and see if we need Jack and Todd anymore?
Jack, will you stick around for the energy committee one?
Be happy to.
Thank you.
We'll make that the next one.
All right.
Folks here. to move on?
Yep.
Okay, we'll come back to them and vote a little bit later.
Thanks.
Dave?
Anytime.
Yeah, thanks, Todd,
No
thanks, Jeff.
So, from past experience, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a tweak to the transfers by town meeting, but if you wanted to vote it and then adjust on town meeting night, that's typically how we've kind of rolled.
Yep,
History has been the
We'll
night
talk.
of.
yep, we'll talk about them.
Yeah.
Dave, you wanna take the lead on the energy committee?
Not really, but. At my first meeting, I discussed the fact that I have some familiarity with this, because full disclosure, I work for the agency that administers the Green Community Act that is the point and purpose of this article. And I talked to Jack and some of the selectmen. I talked to Andy Bakanowski, who's a member of the Energy Committee, about this, and at this point, it would appear that it makes sense to proceed with this article. And at that point, I defer to the Energy Committee on the reasons why. There's a concern that because of the scope of the assessment we would get, that there are utility assessors there are firms that do assessments that are essentially funded by the utilities, who there's either an unspoken or a fully spoken quid pro quo that if they do an assessment, they'll get the work when it's voted on. My understanding, I guess, is that the size of our assessments, due to some of the work that's been done in town, is small enough that they'd almost require a quid pro quo, and the selectmen are uncomfortable with that, and I can understand why. So putting this in place to allow for the assessment to occur so that we can then file our Green Communities application and receive the actual funding we will get, which is at least $140,000, is an appropriate move at this point. If we find a firm that meets the satisfaction of the selectmen and the Energy Committee and doesn't require quid pro quo, the money might not be expended. But I think I would now, at this point, turn it over to the Energy Committee and the town administrator on that end of the ball game.
Let's do this in 3 parts. Larry Sullivan has actually put a presentation together. We're more than capable of showing that to you. It sort of discusses that, but just to fill in a little bit of some of what David said is that we had met with the selectmen now 3 months ago? Yeah, about 3 months ago, and we explained this whole thing with a quid pro quo, plus my experience working for the state and having these vendors come in to do the so-called quid pro quo, and you end up paying $1,200 for a $200 thermostat. So that's essentially what we wanted to avoid. Also, one thing the town has done, they've done a lot of energy work. The lights you see in this room work in the schools, the new school. You have a typical audit, and then you also have what they call a deep audit, and the deep audit actually looks at a lot more detail. The low-hanging fruit is lighting. Lighting will get you where you need to get in most cases if you haven't done work. Unfortunately, we've done a lot of work. We can take credit towards that 20% savings that we're shooting for, but in terms of actually getting that included as work to be done to supplement our energy goals, it just becomes a little bit convoluted, but we still can take credit for that. So hiring a company to do the actual audit, and this would be a deep audit because they would actually be looking at a little more than simply just lighting, some pumps, some VFDs that control wells, pumps, and stuff like that. They need to go a little deeper so they can make sure they get that 20%. One of the big nuggets in town is actually the street lights, and if that happens, that's a big chunk of what we're looking for. So, but again, we're trying to avoid the quid pro quo and then paying a premium on the actual work that's done there, and it makes sense because I've dealt with that many times already. And while it's easy to do, it ends up costing you a lot more money. So, okay. So I'll turn this over to Larry. If Larry can explain, what he did and how he vetted out through some of the contractors. He dealt with most of the contractors who have experience working for municipalities. If you want, he can pull the presentation up. If not, just he can do a verbal discussion, and then Jack can fill anything in that we may have missed.
Okay. Are we open to verbal presentation?
That's fine.
Yeah.
I have
Certainly, Larry.
it's a 7-slide PowerPoint on a jump drive. If you and I can walk you through that.
Idea how to do
I don't know how to do that in here either, sorry. I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, we could just, if you just want to maybe just talk through the
You
topic.
got it in front of you? If you could walk through it and then leave it with us, that'd be great.
Do you have a printout of it, or I can photocopy that for everybody?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a printout of it? Is that what you're holding, or?
Yeah, I think I do have.
Give me 30 seconds, I can put it up on the screen.
Okay.
Okay. What we can do that?
Timing you.
I'm working on it. You can't start counting until I get the thing in my hand.
Okay.
Okay, go.
I'll fill some dead air while they're doing that, but the public safety building is looking at a solar project, and we might be able to take some advantages, some benefits with that, even though we don't necessarily own the operation.
Right.
But that's a stretch, but we'll have to see where that comes into. But even so, the actual building itself, going with energy efficient stuff, and I know that the public safety building is looking at some significant rebates coming from the utilities as new construction. So, and that's outside of the green communities requirements, but it's definitely something that should be done with all new construction. If people haven't figured out the new wing for the Freeman Kennedy, that's a prime candidate for this as well.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, and technical. Oh, all right. Sorry, this may, wasn't expecting that. This may take more than
I had a question originally. It was not as much about whether or not we needed to be green, it was more about paying for an assessment when you get them for free. So, what you're saying is my understanding, you can't actually have a quid pro quo, that would be illegal. So what you're saying is, it's more of an understanding.
you
They
can-
can't make you do it.
they can't make you do it, but again,
So what you're saying is if we have one company come out to get one person, one group, one company come out to give us an assessment, we choose not to go to them, the company we do hire would punish us by charging us more? I don't see, that part is where I don't.
no, I mean, we're asking for $15,000. The actual bids came in lower than that, but just in case they find something else. But here, where I can give you more specifics.
Yeah, we went out to 3 qualified companies that were recommended by DOER. They were approved by DOER, and we put an RFQ together with input from Metropolitan Area Planning Council, who has a close relationship with DOER. And we went out to these 3 firms, and we only got one bid back. It was from
Is this closer?
AMA, I think was the name of the company. Hang on one second. Energy Management Associates, EMA. And their bid was for $12,750. And we requested $15,000 for the warrant, just to provide a 15% contingency in case, anything came up when the actual audit was being conducted. So we were comfortable with the company. As I said, we put the RFQ together and worked with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to get it right. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I don't think that was what I meant.
I think to answer your question, the idea of the deep dive assessment is to get properly framed out projects that then can be put out to competitive bids, so you will get the best price, rather than under the quid pro quo assessment style. They tend to price it out to make their assessment get paid for, if that makes sense. So that if they're spending $5,000 doing an assessment, whatever work they put out in front of you is going to have that $5,000 padded into the costs. And I'm just making up the numbers, but
What these folks are going to do, they're not going to do any of the work. They're doing an audit. And they're not only identifying these energy conservation measures for us, but they're also required to provide energy calculations and cost impact, the capital cost and the long-term cost, the payback, if you will, for all of the energy conservation measures that they identify during the audit. So it's a pretty comprehensive report that we will get from these folks. And then we'll take that and work with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to put together the energy reduction plan, which is the biggest piece of criterion number 3, which is what this whole thing is about, is satisfying criterion 3 of DOER for the green community designation. And then the actual projects that you're referring to, those will come later, and they will be paid for by grants that we will apply for from DOER. Once we become a green community, then we'll be eligible for up to $250,000 a year to execute these energy projects, which all will contribute to reducing the energy consumption of the town, which is we have to reduce the energy consumption by 20% over a 5-year period.
To get the grants,
No,
just to do it.
well,
Require.
it's after the fact. We make a commitment, the town makes a commitment to reduce the energy consumption by 20%. All of this other stuff that we're doing is to get there, to really be able to do it. But, at the end of the day, the town's made a commitment to DOER, and we will have, by that point in time, gotten a lot of hundreds of thousands of dollars from them for projects that we will have executed, all in the name of energy conservation, energy reduction.
The plan triggers the grants, but they measure you on the success of implementing the plan. And if you don't implement it, there's some consequences down the road. They're not heavy duty yet, but there are a number of communities that have missed their 5-year designation, but DOER continues to work with them, so.
Just to give you a sense about the numbers, in 2017, DOER issued designation grants. These were for the towns that were just becoming green communities. The sum total of the money that they awarded in 2017 was $4.3 million, and that was given to 25 communities that had just been designated as green communities. And they're telling us, DOER is telling us, that based on the population and per capita income, we would be eligible for $140,000. The way it works is, you become a green community, you get $125,000. That's the base number. You're not going to get less than that. It never goes down. It goes up as a function of the population density and the income, the per capita income. So that they've made these adjustments. They've got a formula. I don't know what it looks like, but they've come back and they've told us that 140,000 is probably the number that we would see as soon as we become a green community.
So what I've heard is we would spend the 15,000 to become eligible for the designation grant, as opposed to doing a free report to qualify for the designation grant, so that the $140,000 grant goes further, because we would have that to a full and open bid, as opposed to it being back to the person who did the free bid. Is that?
Yeah, the 140,000 is intended to be used for energy improvement projects in the future.
But by paying this now, it's more acceptable for us to do a full and open competition for those projects, as opposed to.
I mean, that's when Andy and I met with the selectmen, that was clearly where they were coming from. They were concerned about being held hostage, and it was certainly a reasonable concern.
Yeah.
And so that's why we backed off. We were originally approaching it from the perspective, or from the standpoint of, we'll get one of these guys to do it on his nickel, and then we'll cut a deal with him, for future work. But it didn't work out. So the negative part of that was we lost time. But the positive, I think the positive aspect of it is we're completely independent. For every energy project that we undertake in the future, hopefully it'll be paid for by DOER grants, but we'll be free to do whatever we want with whomever we want. So it was a good thing to do, I think. I think Andy agrees as well.
Thanks.
Larry, would you like to start going through the presentation for us?
I can if you want.
If we can do it very timely, we've got some time constraints for some of our members.
Jack, you gonna?
Move it forward for you.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Okay. This is a warrant article, as we've been discussing, for funding an energy audit for Norfolk public facilities. There are 5 criteria, and you may already know about these, but 5 criteria need to be satisfied for green community designation by DOER. The requirements of criterion number 3, which is the one we've been talking about, include establishment of the energy baseline for the town and preparation of an energy reduction plan that, when implemented, will result in a reduction in energy consumption of 20% within 5 years. Establishment of the energy baseline requires an energy audit of the Norfolk public facilities. Okay, Jack. Very quickly, criterion 1 deals with as-of-right siting. DOER has already told us that based on the town bylaws, we satisfy criterion number 1. Criterion number 2 deals with expedited permitting of those projects that would be permitted under criterion number 1. This is a little convoluted, but criterion number 2, the only thing we have to do with criterion number 2 is we've got a letter that's being prepared by town council in collaboration with Rich McCarthy, and that will satisfy the requirements of criterion number 2, because our bylaws, our town bylaws, deal with expedited permitting of energy efficient projects. Criterion number 3 we've been talking about. Criterion number 4, fuel efficient vehicle purchase plan, and Jack has issued this purchase plan, and I believe it's on the books now. Criterion 5 deals with the stretch code. That was adopted by the town in December last year. We need the warrant approval by the town to fund the energy audit, because it's funding. It's $15,000 is roughly what it's going to cost. Green community, as I mentioned, green community designation grants for Norfolk are expected to be $140,000, and last year it was the average last year. Well, it's on another slide. It was $172,000 was the average last year, and that was skewed because of the town of Lawrence. They got $594,000 as a designation grant. Big town, high population, perhaps a low per capita income. I don't know all the details, but I know they got a whopping number that skewed the average. Okay, the path forward. We need to establish the energy baseline, the baseline energy consumption for the town. We need to prepare a detailed energy reduction plan. That's part of this whole criterion number 3, that again reduces the baseline consumption by 20% in 5 years. Okay. This we've talked about. We've already talked about all the items on that. We'll go on to the next one. Okay, to satisfy criterion number 3, we requested quotes from 3 DOER qualified bidders, as I mentioned. Scope was to audit, or is to audit, all the Norfolk public facilities and to prepare energy calculations and identify the energy conservation measures, and to prepare a financial analysis for each energy conservation measure, including the capital cost and the payback analysis. And then we can take that and we can decide which ones we want to put into an energy reduction plan that would go back to DOER as part of this whole process. Next one, Jack, please. The status of criterion 3. We identified 3 bidders, Energy Source, Source One, and Energy Management Associates, all approved by DOER. We got 1 bid for $12,750 from EMA, and we suggested a warrant for $15,000, which would have about a 17% contingency in there. One more. Okay, next steps. We issue a purchase order to EMA. These are recommended next steps. We'd work with Metropolitan Area Planning Council and EMA to satisfy criterion number 3. And as I may have mentioned or touched on with Metropolitan Area Planning Council, they are a consultant to DOER, and we worked with them on the developing the RFQ. They're very qualified people. They have a great relationship with DOER, and they'll help us to write the application. And they've done this with many towns, and they've been very successful. And we hope that it'll be the same with Norfolk. We want to complete the green community designation application in the first quarter of 2019, because it's been kicked around now too long. We got to get it done. That's it. Any questions?
I don't.
I have a question.
Jonathan?
Can you address why 2 of the 3 firms no bid?
I'm sorry?
Can you address why 2 of the 3 firms no bid the
Oh, yeah, I
assessment
did.
work?
I thought I mentioned it.
You mentioned that they no bid. I was curious as to if you knew why.
Well, one of them definitely was busy. He had called me and he apologized for not bidding, that he was, eyeballs. We only gave him, I think we only gave him 2 weeks to turn the bid around, because we were trying to get things done quickly. And then I never heard back from the third guy. But the second guy was just too busy.
Do you feel comfortable knowing that with only 1 bid of where that bid stands in relation to what it should be or what it could be? Is that, I mean, only receiving.
Some of the work I do is, we do energy audits as well.
Yeah.
And 12,700 really is not outrageous in terms of the cost. And typically, it's anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 per building. The last fire station I did, which is up in Burlington, that was $7,000 because of all the lighting, because of all the other equipment they have there. So it's not done on a case-by-case basis. We provided square footage and what the use is of the building, and they've done enough where they can probably come up with a number based on that. And there's a lot of people doing this. There's a lot of competition out there to get into the Green Communities Act, or the process as well. So yeah, it's a very competitive market, and it doesn't surprise me that we got no bids on 2.
Well,
That's a pretty good price, dude. I agree. It's a pretty good price for the 7 or 8 buildings that they do.
We have a little over 250,000 square feet of building space, and
is it too good of a price?
we had gotten a price before when we were looking at the quid pro quo. We were in the $9,000 range, but again, that wasn't what Dave and I were calling a deep dive, looking at all the details. They were simply assuming it was low-hanging fruit, which is 90% of that's lighting, and you can achieve your savings through lighting.
So I guess my last question here would be, I don't think this should interrupt the flow of what we're doing here and discussing, but if this isn't going to get voted on or approved until town meeting, is there not time between now and when you would actually go and hire someone to do the assessment to try and get a second or a third bid for comparative purposes?
I mean,
Is there value in that?
I think it's limited value that you get for that. We're not talking about a lot of money for this audit. And these guys, they've worked with DOER and Metropolitan Area Planning Council in the past, and they wouldn't have recommended them to us if that weren't the case.
yeah, your point is well taken about, obviously we have a little bit of, I'll call it slack time between town meeting. Does it make sense to contact a few people? What was the first list we had? It's like 10, 12 people, and I want to say 3 or 4 said, it's going to the cost is, there's going to be a cost associated with that, and we were trying to avoid that, so that eliminated them. So I don't want to rehash everything that we did in the past, but I mean, this has not been sort of just sitting there. I mean, we've tried to do our homework as best we can, and give them as much information as we have. I mean, we were scrambling last minute to get some information to them, but we did. So this is not rocket science. It's a very prescriptive type process. But again, whether they just come through and walk through, look at the room, or they actually are, poking, prodding, measuring, and stuff like that. That's what you want to see, and that's what this does. I mean, this is a thorough investigation.
And we met with these folks too before the RFQ went out, and interviewed them. And so we had a comfort level before we had a comfort level before we went out to bids to them and the other 2 guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
This was a contentious issue for many years for this town. What happens if this article does not pass?
I think the stretch code was a contentious article. I'm not sure that
Right.
Green Community was a stretch.
Is this a backdoor way to side rail stretch code, potentially?
Stretch code is the code for the town, and you would
Understand.
have to go to town meeting floor and undo it to get it off.
But without the audit, we don't go ahead with
I-
this stuff, right?
But we've got from looking at somebody's point of view who wanted to kill the stretch code, we've got the bad part in the books now. That is the stretch, that's the costly part to the developers now, is on the books. We're gonna live with that unless somebody, like Dave said, goes to town meeting and says, we wanna remove the stretch code.
But I thought a
This is all,
prerequisite,
this is the gravy part about getting the grants for having energy reduction projects. So somebody would be kind of short-sighted, to say the least, if they killed the good part and left the bad part on the, and I'm only using that as their words, not mine. Left the expensive part on the books.
but the audit is a prerequisite for the grants.
Right, but my point is, why would they kill the grants?
And
If
keep
somebody
the
was gonna
code.
kill the stretch code,
Why were people so opposed to, I mean, I
They were
just,
opposed to the stretch code.
right.
But
Never
And
discussed this,
And the
but-
stretch code is,
Pat,
yeah.
Pat, the other thing is the town could in fact do a really high-level 20% reduction plan that would then require, and get the designation, but then we would require essentially an assessment afterwards.
I mean,
And so, in fact, we could apply without doing this, but we would not have a good 20% plan to file. It would be we've got a bunch of motors, and we've got a bunch of variable speed drives, and we've got some boilers that can be replaced, and we're gonna replace those. So this gets us actual numbers on what the savings would be, and would get us a real plan that said, when we do these three things, we're gonna reduce by this, and we're gonna save this amount of money and this amount of energy. So, the designation is not at risk, it's just a better, more thorough approach this way.
okay, I'm just worried
If somebody
that,
was gonna fight this again,
Yep.
I would advise them to put together a petition article, or go lobby the selectmen and say you wanna remove the stretch code from the books. But don't be my advice would be, don't be short-sighted in the meantime. Let us get the $125,000 to $140,000 grant for at least a year, maybe, hopefully forever.
I'm just, the fall town meeting is typically a small town meeting, and it doesn't
Yeah.
take a whole heck
You
of
need
a
a
lot of
stack.
people with an axe to grind to
We did it.
give us problems.
Before.
Did it before.
A year ago.
I originally had a question, and I was waiting to see your presentation to see if you answered it, that I had initially a couple weeks ago when we first did this. These are I'm just throwing them out there, for example. You get 140,000, and you're gonna do the work that year with that 140,000. Are you doing $140,000 worth of work, or are you doing $750,000 worth of work, or $2 million worth of work? What I'm trying to figure out is, yes, I understand you're getting free money from the state, but is the amount of work that you're doing going to exceed the grant that you're getting? You know what I'm saying? Like, are they gonna be a complete wash and the town's gonna owe no money, or are you gonna come back and put a warrant in, or vote on, or ask for more money to make us green? I don't have a problem with being a green town, but I would want to know how much is it gonna cost and how much is it gonna save us? If our power bill is $1 million a year, and this thing, and what we're doing is gonna save us $1 million a year, it's a no-brainer. I get that. But if it's not, then I don't know that the town would want, while we're still paying for a public safety building, to put another thing in that's gonna cost us, that doesn't have a return.
Right.
Again, like I said, I don't have a problem being green. I really don't. I think there's always a big, huge push to be green, but you need to think about whether or not it's actually saving you anything. Like, sometimes there was a big push for people to put solar panels on. They spent $20,000 putting solar panels on. It's gonna take them 50 years to recoup $20,000.
Right, so
For example, I'm just trying to figure that out.
So I think, as Larry said, this plan will also provide us the payback schedule. So we'll do the audit, we'll evaluate all the buildings, we'll come up with a plan, replace the boilers, replace, whatever other lights that needs to be done, whatever other insulation. We'll come up with that list of projects and with the payback for each of those. So we'll be able to evaluate the plan before we go to the last step of becoming a green community.
Because we're relatively late to the game on this, do we know the payback that other towns have experienced roughly?
Well, I know that, for instance, if we used Westwood as an example, I know that they've already collected north of $700,000 through green community grants that they've received.
So we're talking like 1, 2, or 3 years for,
Well, it depends. I mean, lighting typically is in the 1 to 2 year range, depending upon, what you have to do. Certain lights are fairly expensive, and you don't see a quick payback simply because it's a special use light.
so it's not one big honkin' project. We're talking about kind of small, based on the energy audit, we're going to pick, of these 15 things, we're going to pick 1, 6, and 5 based upon, that's how this goes?
Well, I was gonna answer Sue.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You were saying sort of all the above in terms of funding
Yeah.
sources, because you have the green communities money, you have the ability to get rebates through utilities, the new police station or public safety building is getting rebates as well. That's a project that we could be contributing to if we had the money. So that's options. DOER leading by example, periodically we'll have municipal grants, for certain projects. Those could be $20,000-$30,000, but that could be enough to relamp an entire building. So there's other things, how we bid it, if we do, and I know, are you familiar with Chapter 25A bidding?
No.
I think that I personally, I can't speak for everybody else, I'm looking for a very simple yes or no. Like, for example, Westwood has received $750,000 from the state in grants.
Mhm.
How much have they spent doing the work? Has it been $750,000,
control that.
or have they been?
We will
Millions.
control that.
There would be, I would think it would be irresponsible for us to put out $1 million worth of work for only $100,000.
Right.
I mean, that's.
But that's the question. Can you
Yeah.
provide more than that sentence that kind of gives some kind of dimension to that?
No, but I think the audit will give us that information, that then we can start evaluating which projects we wanna do.
And then,
And it just gives us access to money that we don't have right now, because we're still gonna, in 2 years, we're gonna replace the boiler downstairs, or at some point in the future.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I'm sympathetic to your point. It's like every time that you say we're going to have access to money we didn't have, I care, but I don't care about that. How much are we spending?
That's what I'm trying to.
What's the proportionality?
The audit will be able to prioritize certain things. So if it's saying this boiler out here, which probably is a $500,000 project, if we wait 2 years, we get 50% covered by it. If it dies in 2 years, and the town has to spend $500,000, we have money in reserve if it hasn't been already allocated for other projects. But, I mean, we have that ability to control that.
What's the mechanism? Do those come back as separate warrants?
Yeah,
If
they
we're spending
would have
town
to,
money,
yes.
it has
Okay,
to
so
be.
then we'll be able to evaluate
Right.
each
Yeah.
project
I-
based
And,
Yeah.
and,
Okay.
yeah, this is not a commitment to all these projects.
No, I
and things.
understand that. I felt like the
I think-
15,000 would be a waste if we were not actually gonna do the work, cause it was gonna end up being in the millions, and we'd never actually do most of this work anyway.
Another,
So that's what I was trying to get at.
Like I said, it'd be irresponsible for us to propose a $1 million project and we only have $100,000 to
Okay,
use.
okay.
Yeah, I
the,
think
Agreed.
the,
a good example that another full disclosure, I was the energy manager in the town for a year, this town. And we did the street lights in the center of town, and we did the lights in this building while I was the energy manager. And there was a serious evaluation of the cost-benefit relationship. We spent close to $100,000 on the street lights, if I'm not mistaken. But the payback was like 3 or 4 years in terms of the energy savings. So it made sense. And it
Okay.
was done out of a capital maintenance budget. So there's some of those projects that'll be done out of the capital maintenance budget. Some of them will have to come back to town meeting because there'll be significant capital investments. And in every case, they'll hopefully be able to present us the savings, the savings plan. If we replace these boilers, we'll save X over X amount of years. It's the dynamic between operating and capital expenditures, and it's the problem that we have with these, is that you spend the money in one pot, and the money that you save goes into another pot, as it were. Different line items, different things like that, but I don't know, it's, we'll have another bite, we'll have a bite at all the apples of anything that's got a significant cost to it.
That's just the question, is
Yeah,
the procedural question.
Yeah,
Great,
the advisory board will have to see.
great. And it sounds like people are confident there's lots of stuff with pretty quick turnaround, so great.
There's still some low-hanging fruit that can be addressed with using the money that we have and then getting supplemented by utility rebates. I mean, a light fixture might be $20 or $30 extra from a utility, so you're saving a 20% off the top.
I mean, I think the way to look at it is, we've been doing energy-saving projects, like the solar panels at the transfer station, for years. Only we've been doing them without state money because we haven't been a green community. We're still going to be doing energy-saving projects if they're profitable for us. But the difference is we'll have state money, which is just icing on the cake. So I think the answer is we're not gonna do anything that we would not have done anyway. It's just a question of, is there extra money in the pot for us or not?
So I'll give you one last nail in the coffin. The oil replacement in the HOD, that would have been a perfect application to be funded partially by Green Communities money. Because the new blowers that went in were much more efficient, and you could come up with a value, so instead of the 380,000, I believe it was.
Do you know what the payback on that is projected to be?
I'm sorry?
Those were replaced.
Those were replaced, yeah.
And do we know roughly what the payback was? 50 years, 20 years, 5?
12% more efficient than the old ones.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
you'd have to figure it out.
An 8-year payback.
Yeah, okay.
Plus they're at the end of their life, so, yeah.
Yeah, which I think was driving it.
That's the real driver there.
And to your point, Pat, I always got this, or to me, when I was paying attention to these things, my sense was when a major item was up for replacement, that's when we bought something that was more energy efficient, not, this doesn't have to get replaced, let's go for something that's more energy efficient. I don't really recall that, but.
I think the lights and the streetlights were two projects that we
That
did
fit that
after the
category? Okay.
lights.
Okay.
We did these out of capital maintenance money that they had, like the facilities.
Even though there was life left in them?
Yeah.
Okay,
facilities
cool.
maintenance, yeah.
Okay. That's helpful.
We're pretty much all set with this one?
Mhm.
I have one last question. If this moves forward, where was the 15 coming from?
Came out of
On your free cash.
Yeah.
free cash.
It's in the
It
free
wasn't-
cash.
Yeah,
Was it
It's on the list.
It's in the
list?
transfers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I looked briefly, but
No, it's fine.
As well to the items that said that there's some
It's on the free
figure
cash.
Top of the next
Yeah.
page.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right, that audit. Okay, perfect, thanks. Sorry about that. We all set with this one?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
Thanks, Andy, thanks,
you.
Larry.
Thank you.
Okay. I think, we're all set with you guys. I don't know if we have any other questions, if you wanna stick around for the rest of our discussion.
Yeah.
Excuse myself, please.
Yes. We may, we'll have a little bit of a discussion.
You sure?
Let's see, if I'm not mistaken, we've gone over 1, gone over 2, 3, 4. We've hit on 5, we've hit on 6. 7 we're aware of. 8 we've voted. There's 9, 10, and 11, which, when Dave comes back, because I know that he had a, couple of questions probably, I'll update you on those. 12 we've discussed, 13 we've heard about with more information coming later, and 14 we've voted on already. And is that pretty much a good summary?
I agree.
Dead on.
Okay. All right, I'll start, if, we can always rehash quickly. But Article 9, 10, and 11, those were all submitted by the planning board. And after our meeting a couple of weeks ago, they were still meeting in this room, so I stopped in and just listened for a little while, and lucky enough to, hear some of their brief discussion about whether they were supporting or how they felt about the articles that they had submitted. So the first one that I'll do, because that's an easy one, Article number 10, which is site plan approval changes, building commission, zoning enforcement officer, and replacing with planning board. I actually have their recommendations in front of me, which Betsy forwarded to me this afternoon. They are recommending, they unanimously are recommending an indefinite postponement on that one. They don't feel that they have enough information and they want to tweak the wording. So that one, based on the planning board we'll still have to vote on it, but their recommendation is to IP it.
Okay, are you looking for a motion?
No, not
Oh.
yet. I'm just giving you some background information.
Ready.
Oh, you're ready to, you're
Oh.
ready to vote.
Me too.
Sorry.
I'm sorry,
How
can
about
I
if
ask
we
a,
can go back, we can go back and come through these and vote on them.
well, maybe this is more a procedural question, but is this warrant finalized? If they submitted it and they wanna IP it, why is it even need to continue on the warrant? Why isn't it just removed?
Well, we don't
That's not
put
our
the
choice.
warrant
Right,
together.
I know, but that's maybe Jack left, but maybe that's the question, is
I
why,
can give 'em a- I
why
can
go
give 'em a
through all
call.
the exercise to submit it, say we don't want it, us to IP it, recommend to IP it, just take it off the warrant?
It's.
Cause this
it's-
isn't the final
Be up to
warrant.
No,
The
it's
selectmen
very
could do that.
possible that they will be doing that. I'm just bringing
Planning
you
board.
guys up to date on what the planning board is looking to do with these articles.
Got it, so let's just hold them before taking any action on 10. So we'll wait on 10.
Are we maybe I'm misunderstanding IP, because are you just saying that they're gonna come back with a different version of it? Or
I
are they
have-
saying they don't wanna deal with it
The
this
planning board
town
voted
meeting?
unanimously to recommend indefinitely postponing of this article to allow additional time to make further improvements to the bylaw.
Presumably
they're not gonna
additional
do it
time
this
being
year.
the spring.
More than likely, I don't know.
Okay.
Which just raises
But
the
to
question, why don't
Jonathan-
you just withdraw it?
Yeah,
seems
to
to me
Jonathan's
Jonathan's
point, why
point
vote
is
to IP it if you
just
don't?
withdraw it.
Yeah,
I'm not
the
asking us
selectmen
to
should pull
IP
it.
it.
I understand that
I'm
choice.
explaining to you that the planning board is recommending that.
And that
I-
recommendation confuses me because they should just
It
withdraw
makes
it.
too much sense.
It makes too much sense
That's why
to
it's
remove it.
confusing.
Well, the
right.
selectmen should pull, the selectmen would be the ones to
And they
pull the
probably will.
article,
They
and
did
they
this
should
late
do
this
it.
afternoon.
Okay,
So,
Yeah.
that's good
trying
to
to
know.
bring you guys
Yeah.
up to speed.
Thank you, Joyce.
So we should
That's good to
probably
know.
just do nothing this week, I would say.
Yeah, let's just hold on it.
Okay, do you wanna hear about Article 9?
Yes, please.
Sure.
9.
Okay, so Article 9, it has a pipe through here. They're looking to change or delete some of the wording. They have continued along with that. They haven't changed any of it. As you see printed in what we have, they have voted unanimously themselves to support, and they are supporting this article. They want to keep it on the warrant, and they're asking for approval on it.
So they're just changing the map.
They're changing the map, and one of the things that, who's doing it? It might be the town planner, I'm not exactly sure. He was asked by the planning board to reach out to one of the homeowners that is a neighbor of where the, boundaries are now going to be set on the map, just to inform them of where their lot lines are going to be on the map. So I'm not entirely sure if that has been done. I'm just bringing you up to speed on what the planning board is doing with that article.
So I heard the language might change.
No, language is not going
So-
to change.
No, they
There's
voted
just
to say
another-
yes.
they
This language
voted
makes
to
no
approve.
sense, the way it's written, the way they,
Right.
Does
Which
this,
is depicted,
Yeah.
Which is
which is
depicted
depicted
in
is
here.
hereby made
and
part
is,
of.
right,
um,
Yeah.
depicted
wait
where?
a minute.
Right,
The map, the date on the map is 3 weeks from now.
that's
I
right.
know.
How does that work?
So,
They're probably going to tweak it,
Yeah.
So it is being
But
tweaked,
the-
it's the
but the
lines,
functionality of it is
yeah.
not changing.
So no one knows what the actual impact is to any homeowner at this point.
Right now,
That's
that
right.
there isn't any impact except to one neighbor, and they are,
According
they
to
have
the planning
asked
board.
the- right. Uh-huh.
Okay.
I would ask to see a picture of the map, because if we're including language that said the map is depicted, I'd like to see it before I make a recommendation whether or not I accept it.
Okay,
Like right after Thanksgiving, right?
Is that the date of the town meeting?
it is.
Yeah.
That's really problematic, Joy.
Just bringing you up to speed.
I
on what
appreciate
they
that.
discussed.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay, and which is depicted doesn't make sense. You're right, the sentence is
Mhm.
not complete, so if they could clarify that, that would be great.
So we can't vote on that one either.
No,
And Article 11, that is the article, they are recommending approval on that one as well. And they are, just changing from 15 copies.
oh, right.
Everything is digital now, as it was
Yeah.
explained to me. They don't need to have all of the copies they recommended support and approval of that one as well. What we can do is we can ask them to come in.
Since they're gonna have to explain 9 anyway, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe 10.
11 seems pretty easy.
Yeah,
11
I don't
seems
have a
easy.
problem voting on
Yep.
that.
And grammatically correct.
It's bonus
Um,
points.
Okay, are we looking for a motion?
Do we want to ask them to come in for the 14th? Do we want to meet next week?
We had planned on it.
I can meet, but only till 8 o'clock.
When do they meet
So if
again,
we're
you
gonna
know?
vote, I'd like to do it,
I'm not entirely sure when they're,
I have to do the,
we could ask one of them to come in.
Because they could conceivably tweak 11 between now and,
I don't, I got the impression that
Ele-
they
wait,
want
not-
a lot more
I think he
time.
means 9.
10.
9 needs tweaking, 11's fine, right?
9 probably is gonna be tweaked.
Pat said 11 needs tweaking.
Right, 11's good.
no, I think 11's okay.
Okay,
But the
11
question
seemed
is
okay.
whether
next
they
week
will
is our
change it
only chance to
between
meet
now
again
and
before the meeting.
then. And are we gonna vote?
They
Yeah,
voted
because
on
the
it.
following Wednesday
They
is the night
voted
before
on it as they
Thanksgiving.
submitted it.
We
Well-
can only meet next week,
That's correct.
right?
Yep.
Because, I
Next
could
week
do
is
I
that.
the
think we
last
should
one.
ask them
Yeah.
to come.
yeah, let's just have them come and we could vote on their 3 articles
Right.
after they
You want
finish.
someone from planning
That
board?
makes sense, I think, yeah.
Please,
I might not be here for that one, so.
9, 10, and 11, okay.
So the 14th.
They can
See
go
if we can
first.
get someone from the planning board to come in.
Great.
All right.
We talked a lot about 12 just now. Do we want to, while we're there?
Yeah, if you feel comfortable with that.
I'd like somebody to make a motion to vote on everything except the planning board ones, if that's okay.
I think we have to go through them individually.
Yeah, we gotta,
Individually.
the votes are separate. But I'm with you in spirit. So I,
In theory, can we start on, can I make a motion to vote on number 1?
oh, sure, we can go
Yeah, there we
sequentially.
go. Get us started.
Let's just go.
Seconded. Seconded.
I guess I
Motion
What was
to
the motion?
accept it?
Article 1.
Uno,
Is that?
there's a
Back
desire to
to
go
the beginning.
chronologically. Let's do it.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve Article number 1 as presented. It has been seconded. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, Article 1 is done. 2 we're waiting on, 3 we're waiting on, 4 we're waiting on, 5 and 6 we're waiting on, yes?
No, I didn't think that. Why are we waiting
why are-
on all of those? I thought that's what he
I think
explained to us tonight.
Todd said that there might be small tweaks, but
Yes.
I don't, are we gonna be voting on these before town meeting?
Well, not if,
We would be voting on them. We typically meet an hour before town meeting in case this sheet changes. That's typically what we've done.
I thought he said he was
Yeah,
gonna tweak the
John?
comments,
Yes.
not the
Yeah,
articles.
the transfers
Yeah.
usually are the night off, because there's always tweaks right up to the very
Right.
end.
but he said he was just,
He said he was gonna
Just the-
fix the comments.
yeah, but, I mean, do we have to wait to vote
There,
till he fixes
I would bet money those transfers
Yes.
are gonna change.
But
Okay,
the
so
numbers
let's hold.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we, back to Article 4, Joyce, sorry, but
Yes.
I thought we were told there would definitely be none and that we could IP for.
But it's on our sheet. Those are the capitals. It's on our transfer sheets.
Is the purchase, Article 4 is the purchase of capital items, of which there are gonna
There's a,
be none.
there's there's 2 or 3 vehicles.
But they're capital expenditures. This is
Vehicles,
Article
are
4.
vehicles capital?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why
So
do
they're
we
on the
have
list.
non-IP
Page 2
written
at the top of the handout.
here? Out of transfers.
From transfers
Raise and
to,
appropriate or transfer from any available source of funds, borrow or bond pursuant.
Right, and we're transferring from free
to fund
cash.
Capital and other expense items.
Okay,
So
I don't know why I
Article
wrote
4
what I
is
wrote
from-
here then. Okay.
Because when he was talking about that, I asked him, so that one's number 4.
So 5 and 6 fit in the same category, right?
5
So
and 6 fit in the same, correct.
7 we don't vote on?
So
No,
I,
we do not.
I'm sorry to go
That's
back,
okay.
but capital expenditures, I normally wouldn't think of renting pond clearing equipment and doing an audit, energy audit as a capital expenditure, is that?
they're both related, but energy audit is because it's related to capital expenditures.
Okay, it's part of the
It's
capital
it's
planning,
for
okay,
capital expenditures.
all right.
The rental of the Chestnut.
Yeah, but it says other expense items.
Doohickey, yes.
Yeah. That's fine. As long as we're good.
Yeah,
Which takes us to Article 7, we don't vote on, which takes us to 8.
8, we've already voted on that.
Well done.
9, we're waiting.
10 and 11, we're
10,
waiting.
10
Back
we
to
could
12.
vote on. 10 we could vote on
No, we said we're
Yes.
gonna hold all 3 for the
Let's-
planning board.
for the planning board.
I would,
They're gonna be here anyway.
right,
All
I
right.
agree. I
Could
think
we
this
have a
needs-
motion?
To approve Article 12? Sure.
No, we're talking Article 10.
10, we're gonna wait for the planning board to come here. They can
You
speak to
do
all
want to
3.
do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're
Do
gonna- they're
we
gonna be
want
here
to
anyway.
ask if, I mean,
They want to.
do we want to ask, do we want to prepare the question, can they get it removed, rather than have us vote on it? Can it just disappear?
That's
They
number
don't have to
9.
remember everything. Oh.
That's-
No,
No, it's the
number
item-
10. You're
number
right,
10,
sorry,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
Rather
Number
than,
10.
I mean, so when they come here, maybe Article 10 is no longer there, and Article 11
Off the
becomes
table.
Article 10.
Right. Could be.
So it's a,
I'll copy you,
Worst comes to worst, we IP it.
Yes.
but it's
It's
should
silly,
be off
silly.
it.
procedural motion that wastes 3 minutes at town meeting then.
Why don't we just vote to IP it now, and then if it disappears, it disappears, and if not, we've already voted on it.
Perfect.
that's fine with me.
Make a motion to vote on Article 10,
Mhm.
To IP it.
IP it.
Seconded.
There's a motion for recommending indefinitely postponing Article 10. It has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 11, we will wait.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I get what you're saying, the planning board's already gonna be here, but does anybody have any questions about that? I mean, it's just saying now you don't have to provide 15 copies, it's just literally wording.
It's streamlining, yeah.
Do we wanna wait? I mean, I'm just trying to think of efficiency, because I would
I
like
agree.
to come to the meeting where we're gonna be voting, I made a commitment and I would like to be here, but I have to leave at 8 o'clock that night, so I would like to vote on everything that we possibly can tonight, plus, we don't know if everyone can even make it next week, so.
If this one's not gonna change,
If it's
I
not-
think we should just vote on it.
We're just talking about making it digital. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. I don't see.
I don't think Article 11 is going to change at all.
So I make a motion to vote on 11.
Seconded.
I know, vote to what, though?
But,
Approve.
yeah.
Seconded.
Don't get it.
Very good. There is a motion on the table to approve Article 11.
Mhm.
It has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I move to approve Article 12.
Seconded.
Is there any further discussion?
This is what we just talked about, so.
You never know. All those in favor of approving Article 12, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's a motion.
We can't vote on 13 because they're still figuring that out, right?
Correct. And we've already done 14.
Boom. It's a short warrant.
Okay, so I didn't realize we meet before town meeting. That's a different day of the week, so I didn't have that in, so just let me add that in.
We
So on the
typically-
27th, you'd like to meet at 6 o'clock?
Yes,
Here or at the school?
at the school.
At the school,
Okay.
in the library,
If it's,
Yep.
with the candlestick.
I got a lot, if it's not in my calendar, I don't do it, so.
6
It
o'clock,
does not
right?
get done if it's not in there.
And we're at the usual
I've never been over there, so I
And
can't
that's the
Uh,
27th.
help you with that one.
H. Olive Day.
No, it's.
No,
it's
no,
in
at
middle
the high
school.
school,
The
junior high.
Middle school.
Yeah.
What's in the middle
it's
school?
in
Middle
middle.
school. 6 o'clock, okay.
Robin? Yes. Let's see if we can get some sort of, idea about 11, about 10, the.
9?
All right?
We voted on 10, you want 9?
We did. We
Still
voted
want
on
more
it.
ambition 10.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
still see if, it
Removing
will
it.
come off with the Board of Selectmen,
Okay.
based on what the planning board is saying. And let's see, and you and I can chat tomorrow, maybe, get Steve involved as well, because he's chair. Find out how they're going to tweak the verbiage in Article 9.
And depending on this, we'll decide if they
Right.
want coming in
Decide
next week.
whether someone should come on the
Bring
14th.
a map in front of them.
And then I'm thinking either
I'm wondering who's the
Jack
land is based there
or,
for changing. It's not-
Jim Lehan
does that
to
say?
see if there's any further progress on the negotiations on Article 13, which is the
Land.
DOC land. Otherwise, maybe he would come on the 14th.
Jim is gonna come on the 14th.
Anyway,
He has it scheduled, because he missed tonight.
okay,
We
good.
still want him.
Told me
Yeah.
he was
So-
coming when I talked about the energy.
Yeah, he said he was gonna be
Okay.
here that day unless we don't need him.
Okay, let's see.
I'll confirm with
Let's see how
everything.
it goes, yeah. Do we have any, we do have other business. I'm sorry. I'll make it quick, Jonathan. The postcards. Postcards for mailing out regarding the warrant. And remember we had this discussion, for those of, we talked about it last fall or spring or whenever. Whether we wanted to do a full warrant mailing or whether we wanted to do a postcard to say, what, the warrants are available where at town hall or something?
On the
Different
town meeting
locations.
website, right?
Or the,
Or do we do hard copies in
Yeah,
Vinegar?
they'll put them in the library, they'll put them at
Yeah, I
town
think
hall,
they
they-
do.
4 or 5
Sue
different
said we
places.
print out like 150 copies and have them available.
okay.
We tried that once, I thought we got some intense comments at one of the town meetings that people like getting the document.
Can the postcard
We
just,
have tried.
can the postcard be a postcard, but be a synopsis of each warrant?
No.
Instead of actually listing each warrant, can you do that?
It's
I
up
don't
to
believe
the-
there'd be space, but I could talk to Sue for that.
You know, like it could,
I-
I don't know if this is legal, but you could say like Article 1 through Article 6 deals with transferring of funds, and then Article, like, you know, very
But if you're,
succinct.
if you're mailing something, whether it's 2 pages or 5 pages.
No,
doesn't
I meant
really-
fit it onto a postcard. I mean,
I can ask about that, but I'm not sure.
Personally, I think getting the warrant improves attendance at town meeting to some extent.
okay.
I
I
just
mean, I
think
guess it just
people
comes
get
down
it,
if you have the
I mean,
budget.
people get a postcard and it's one of the 67 postcards in the mail that day and they're.
We,
The
when
warrant does
we
stand out.
historically have experimented with not mailing. It's always been negatively received, and we've always wound up going back to,
I mean, and if it's in the budget to
Mail.
mail them, then just,
it comes out of our, it's like $3,000, it comes out of our pot.
I would support just continuing it.
And I think
People like it.
we'll just get flack if we don't do it.
Jonathan, care one way or the other?
Cut our losses, go all digital. It's gonna happen. Let's do it now and save the $3,000. People will complain, they'll get over
There are a
it.
number of folks in town who will never log on to a computer.
They can,
and-
well, they can get one at the library then. I'm not saying don't print any of them. I'm saying don't mail any of them.
and don't
Okay.
even do a postcard, just.
We can do a postcard as a nice bridge for the people who still need to get it in the library, and then in a few years, we can stop sending the postcard. But I'd say there's no reason to wait of stopping mailing it now.
If we had a better web presence, I would be somewhat more supportive of that, but our webpage is better than it used to be, but it's not good.
Doesn't need to be good. You just put it right on Norfolk
People don't go to it
town
because.
dot whatever it is and just
but
have it.
People don't go to it because it's not good.
Well, they'll go to it if they want to download the warrant.
They might not know there's town meeting. There's gotta be something.
Postcard.
That was a bridge.
Sure. And then in a few years, we will be sending emails, and it will be opt-in only, or you'll have to opt out of getting the email. Whatever it turns out to be, it's gonna happen. Why are we spending $3,000 to send the warrant to however many people that just put it in the shredder? I shred it just the same way that you said people shred the postcards.
It's certainly
So-
true that it's largely.
I will
a waste of
say, I'm
paper.
on this committee now, and I'm actually pretty active in politics, to be honest with you. I've lived here 10 years, I've never once read it. It's like newspaper feel,
Yep.
right in the garbage, right in the recycle bin. I have a basket right where I check my mail, it goes in, I've never once read it, I'll be honest with you. I'm sure you've got a good 50 people in town who always read it and always show up at town meeting and always vote, but I haven't, and I consider myself pretty, yeah, I mean, but I consider
That's me
myself
too, so.
pretty interested. I attend the town meetings. I vote in every local election. I've been in caucuses, I've been in all kinds of things, and I've never read the warrant. So,
It is true
Ahead
that
of
of
time.
what,
Ahead of time.
however many thousands get mailed, only 50 or 75 or 100 people show up, maybe 250 to 500 might actually look at the warrant in the mailbox. So maybe the postcard that says, town meeting is such and such a date, here's the link that you can go look at the actual warrant. Maybe that's a good intermediate point to get out of paper and into digital.
I'll be honest with you, I'm new here, so I'm not gonna push one way or the other, because I don't,
We get
I
flack,
haven't been
but-
here enough to see how much it works. I can only speak to what I've done with it, so.
Okay, so
I'm gonna defer, I'll vote if you want me to, but I'm gonna defer to you guys to.
we're not gonna vote, but we are a democracy, so we are going to do a show of hands.
Okay.
Postcard, raise your hand, please.
I know it's gonna be tied.
Mail the warrant.
Gotta pick Susan.
You're gonna make me vote
Yeah.
aren't you?
Yep.
All right, then I vote for postcard, cause I'm all about saving money. I mean, that's just me. If I can save money, I'll save money. I think, I
Okay.
know I don't read it, so I'm assuming that most people don't. I tried not to vote. You're making me cast the deciding vote, and that's what I'm
Sorry, Susan.
doing.
All right, if you would let Susan know that, by a show of hands, we
I'm gonna try it again.
We are.
She'll know what we're talking about.
In agreement that for the fall, for the special town meeting, we will agree to the postcard, and we will revisit this for a spring town meeting.
And we'll print out some copies to put places, or we're just doing postcard?
Oh, no, we'll print out
Yeah.
more.
I think you should put a huge stack at
Sure,
town hall and
put
a
them in
stack at
town
the
hall,
library.
and put them in the library, and put them in the middle school
We'll
for,
at least get,
Put 'em at the
For the night of.
Put 'em at the senior center,
the
where
other
the
thing
folks
she
who are
mentioned-
not gonna log.
put
in
them at the
will be
senior
able to-
center.
Is that all recommendations have to be in by the 16th for the warrant, even if we're not mailing the warrant?
yeah,
All the recommendations from us need to be in by the 16th
Okay.
to me.
okay.
Okay.
What I will do then.
Steve better get busy.
We will, no, we'll probably all have a share in this. What we'll do is, we'll have Steve figure out who needs to write what. Some of them will have to be left until the meeting, after the 14th, and then you'll just have
Typed
to
up and put on the
work
screen.
hard. So we'll have Steve divvy that up.
Okay.
If we're not voting on 1 through 6 until the night of the school, I'm sorry, the town meeting, will they still go in
We'll
Yes.
say,
as they're currently worded?
Yes.
but it'll say, like, our recommendation will be provided the day of town meeting. There's a note that we,
They will say that, okay.
it'll say.
And if there's a presentation, we pop it up on the screen.
All right, we are meeting next week. You'll send out a reminder to everybody through Base Camp.
So we want Jim next week, regardless.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not gonna hurt.
Okay.
We can go over, we can just, bounce some things off of them. Steve will be back.
Steve and the planning board,
and the
or
planning
somebody
board.
from the planning.
We'll get some, I'm gonna make some phone calls tomorrow.
And hopefully the selectmen will have that land thing nailed out.
Common correction of land. All right, any other business this evening? Jonathan, sorry, we're a little late.
That's okay.
Move to adjourn?
Second.